Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for being here. As I sit around and see who's not, I want to remind my committee that you get 3 absences. Everybody do like this. 3 absences, and then you get to give me my pen back. Y'all bow with me. Lord, thank you for another day in this wonderful kingdom. Thank you for the blessings of life. Thank you for the blessings that you give us individually and corporately. Let us do things that please you. Forgive us of our shortcomings, in particular me. Lead us and guide us. Let us do things that please you. I ask these things in the name of the Prince of Life. Amen. Howard? Mr. Maxwell.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here. And if you ever have any openings, I've been available for a number of years to serve on this illustrious committee.
I'm going to have some. I'm probably going to have some before you know it.
Well, I'm always available and looking forward to serve, Mr. Chairman. I got 2 little bills today. House Bill 83, number 2 on the list. This is a firefighters pension fund. This is just going to allow the firefighters, if they so desire, sometime in the future, to invest up to 10% of their total assets in real estate. This has been done for a number of years by the Georgia Municipal Employees Benefits Association, and they've had fairly good success with this. And the Firefighters Fund is just asking for the availability, if and when they ever desire to do it, that they would be allowed to invest in that particular area of assets. Another way of diversification, diversifying their portfolio.
Any questions, Mr. Maxwell? Mr. Maxwell, is it not true that the Firefighters Fund has performed very well?
It has done extremely well over the last few years, sir. They're very adept in their investment procedures.
Next one.
House Bill 84. This has been that we allowed them to go in and invest in alternative investments. This was the first of our pension funds back in '09 that came to us and asked for alternative investments. We allowed them to do it in 2010. We gave them a 5% maximum that they could put into the alternative investments, but we've got it by their commitment. It's 5% commitment that's never been drawn down. They had $38 million in commitments, and over the last 7 years, they've only drawn down $24 million. They still got $14 million sitting there in commitments, and that may be drawn down over the next 5 or 6 or 7 years. It may not be. What they're asking is to go up to 10% in commitments. They've made 15% return over the period of time on the alternative investments. They've done really well with that, but they're sort of locked in right now. They're capped out at that 5%, and they're asking to go up to 10% of commitments, so that they'd have a little more wiggle room in actually putting money into alternative investments. So that's what this bill does. And like I said, they've done really well. We've got all the numbers and the charts so we can show you on how their investments have performed.
Madam Pro Tem. Jane.
How is it done over the last 10 years on average? I mean, we've had problems with some of the other pension plans. I was just curious, not specifically, but in specific numbers, but in general, how's it done?
Well, they've 15% over the last 5 years. I've got that 11.6 return, 15% on their alternative investments, 11.6 return on the Russell 3000 benchmark. I don't know if I have the numbers on a 10-year period, ma'am. I can get that for you.
But it's your understanding
it's performing very well. Yeah, they're up to about $80 million in their fund.
Mr. Willard.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Mr. Maxwell, I'm not remembering what were considered alternative investments. Can you give us some better
Ooh,
explanation
Lord have
of
mercy.
that.
Private equity vehicles, it's public companies make up about, it says 5% of existing companies in America. It's public equity vehicles allow the fund, I'm trying to see if I've got that right here. I really can't remember all the ones. That was a big discussion
It sounds like
we had
they have
10 years
risk
ago.
to them. That's what I'm trying to.
I'm sorry, sir?
It sounds as if they have some form of risk to them.
There's-
They get a
there's-
higher return.
It's a little higher risk, yes, sir. It's startup companies, a lot of the startup companies, they'll go out and ask for the private equity in these companies. It is a higher risk, but if they do it right, I mean, you're going to lose a little money at it, but the gains
Is it
offset
done-
the risk.
May I follow up? Is it done, Mr. Maxwell, through what we call a pool, like mutual fund of these form of alternative investments? Are they doing it directly with a particular company?
No, they're doing it through a pool, and they can only put 2% of their funds into any individual investment.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, your mic still won't work?
Cut me off, but thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question, and thank you for coming forth. I'm just want some clarification. It sounds like you've had an excellent run with the return on investments, and it sounds like the alternatives, there's a lot of familiarity here. They look a lot like hedge funds, but my question is, if you're doing that well, and I understand diversity, but what's the purpose of fixing what seems to be running very smoothly?
We're just trying to allow them a little more room to invest more dollars in alternative investments. Right now, they're capped out. They've reached the 5% max on commitments. We had a lot of discussion about that when this bill was passed back in 2010, whether it was going to be committed or actually drawn down dollars, and we decided to go with committed dollars. A couple of people on the retirement committee were really adamant about that, and it's taken me about 5 years to work through to maybe get some changes to their way of thinking. But it's just allowing them to put a little bit more money out for commitment that'll be drawn down. That may be drawn down over a 3 or 4 or 5 year period. It doesn't, just because you commit it, it's when these funds decide they need this extra investment. Now, there's another part here. If they reach the 10% cap, they've got 2 years to divest to get back down below the 10% cap, because they can't go over that. Okay, if for some reason it were to be drawn, the full commitments were to be drawn, they've got 2 years if they get over 10% to bring it back down.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Chairman Maxwell. Isn't it true that this is going to allow them to go to 10%, does not require them to go to 10%?
Exactly. It's just going to give them a little wiggle room.
And isn't it true that the fiduciary folks at this fund have had, I believe, the best return that we have on any of our retirement funds? That would be ERS, TRS. Now, given they're smaller and can be more nimble. Right. Isn't that true? And isn't it further true that when you talk about the 10% being drawn down over, that would be if the investments perform at a greater rate of return than the rest of the portfolio? It could actually drive them up where more than 10% of their portfolio is in an alternative investment because they had a great return, and then at that point they draw down that money and realize the return and the money they've made, right?
Yes, it could happen that way. They could get to where if they've had appreciation on the assets, they could reach the 10%, but they've been paid back out of the $24 million that was invested. They've made $9 million back on that already. I mean, they paid out 24. They've got a $9 million return already, and they've still got $14 million that hadn't been drawn down.
Mr. Williams, I didn't mean to wake you up. They just informed me the reason that your microphone doesn't work, that it appears over the years that you can be a little wordy. and we'd like to keep that down to a bare minimum.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask for favorable consideration on both these bills from this illustrious committee today. If there are no more other questions.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the committee.
Mr. Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bring before you today House Bill 64. It's third down under modified structured. It's Protection and Guarantee of Service for Health Insurance Consumers Act, and very simply, it ensures that compensation is paid to agents on services that they provide, and then conversely, it allows individuals and small businesses an advocate with respect to their health care plans. Thank you for your consideration.
There are no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Mr. Earhart, would you like to do your bills?
37 or 144. Either, right, the amendment's not out on the desk for 144. I'd like to do 37.
Okay. We'll wait. Mr. McCall.
Wait.
Yes. I know it's 4-H Day. But I'm having to call all over the Capitol to try to find you, to remind you that if you want your bill on the floor, it'd be a good thing for you to come by and say hello.
I've been running here just for you.
Mr. McCall, go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 176, all it does is give the Georgia Department of Agriculture the authority to do inspections on certain farms that qualify under a new Food Safety Act by the federal government. Most important thing it does is keeps the federal government off of Georgia farms. So that's what they need, this little old authority to be able to do that.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you. I'm just want to comment on how dapper you look today. Is it not true? And did you have to buy a tie to match your blazer, or is it?
No, I just hope it matches. I didn't have any women in my office this morning that early to tell me whether it did or not.
Congratulations on the green jacket.
Thank you.
Mr. Fleming.
Mr. Chairman, right here. Mr. Chairman, right here.
Oh,
There
I'm
you
sorry.
go. There you go. So you said the purpose of this is keep the federal government out of our agricultural business. Is that what you said?
Off of farm production agriculture.
Are we concerned about the agriculture department going forward in Washington now?
Do what now?
I said, do we have concern about the agriculture department in Washington going forward?
Well, we hope it does all right. It's just if they'll go on and approve the guy that come out of that South Georgia crowd.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I told somebody that our new ag secretary is going to be as hard-headed as our new president, I think, from what I know of it.
I don't think you have to think that. I think we all know that. Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and great question. But also, I'm not sure we're too much worried about the agriculture department, but we do have the U.S. Food and Drug Administration in here that's part of it. So that is probably a federal agency that we do worry about coming in here.
I think
and that's
you're
part
correct.
of the bill. So again, I'd rather us Georgia folks be in charge of this than having the feds come in.
It's a whole lot easier when you can walk across the street and talk to the folks in charge with a little bit of common sense.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Willard.
Good morning. I'm asking for House Bill 126 this morning, Mr. Chairman. This is the bill that follows up from what we did last year with the constitutional amendment on the Judicial Qualification Commission. We also passed a House Bill 808, which was the beginning of the reforming of that commission. This is a follow-up of that, and it's based upon a study that was done by a committee of this House. And The main thing it does, to put it briefly, it brings fairness, due process, and transparency to this agency, which in the past has been lacking in those areas. It provides for 2 panels. One will be a investigative panel consisting of the original 7 members and a hearing panel. So that is the due process part of it. If there is a need for the investigative panel to pass on a complaint to be resolved through a hearing, there will be a separate panel of 3 members for that purpose. The transparency part of it is that it provides for greater opening of the records and the transactions and business conducted by the commission. In the past, all their meetings have been completely closed. It was almost like a secret society, and this is to now have openness for the meetings. Also, when they've made decisions regarding the discipline of a judge, that decision itself will go to the Supreme Court and be a public record. So we're asking for a favorable consideration of House Bill 126. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Let me just make a comment. I think I might have been the only non-lawyer judge, whatever, that was served on that thing, and it was an eye-opening experience for, I guess, somebody like me and everybody else out here. And I think that it's justified even more so now by the vote that was taken by the people of the state of Georgia, where 60-something%,
Over 62%, nearly 2/3.
62% of the people in the state of Georgia agreed that we need to do something. And this is, I won't say it's the first step, but its time is here. Thank you, Mr. Wood. You want to do the next one?
And House Bill 75, which I asked for yesterday, this was one dealing with the need to have some protection of records where they're shared by investigating agencies such as district attorneys or police departments with DFACs on a particular issue regarding the need of DFACs to know about something going on in the family that the investigating officers are aware of, so they protect those children and keep it confidential.
No questions. Anyone else? Okay. We're going to set the calendar for Thursday. Under modified open, HB 176. Do I hear a motion? All those in favor signify by aye. It's on. Under modified structure, HB 64. Do I hear a second? All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under modified structure, HB 75. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under modified structure, HB 126. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. And that's it.